Thank you, Helen. So as you pointed out, my name is Dave Merrill, and I'm a geriatric psychiatrist at UCLA at the Semel Institute. I've been on faculty since about 2010, and before that I was a resident in psychiatry in both the adult and geriatric residency programs. So today's topic for me is going to be introducing lifestyle medicine and how that can be applied to achieving successful and healthy aging. And before I start, I want to make a couple acknowledgments. Again, to thank Dr. Lavretsky for inviting me. She's been one of my primary mentors at the university. And then also to point out that I've gotten a lot of supportive research funds from the UCLA CTSI Center, as well as other foundations and NIMH grants, of which Dr. Lavretsky has been the PI of several. So in any case, today I will be discussing off-label use of lifestyle habits. So, I realize this conference is about the entire lifespan, but I'm a geriatric psychiatrist, so I wanted to share my 2 cents about the silver tsunami or the golden wave of baby boomers. It's now up to 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day, all year. And so why is this happening? There's been an outstanding increase in life expectancy from age 65 onward over the last 50 years, and it's a worldwide phenomenon, not only in the US, but in places like Japan as well. Women can expect to live about 20 years longer on average, and men only get about 15, and usually only about 5 or 10 of those are good. But in any case, the golden years. What are the problems? So with great age comes great wisdom and the knowledge that by 85 years of age, you have a 1 in 2 chance of developing this syndrome called, well, it used to be called dementia. Now, because life is complicated, is called major neurocognitive disorder. So you used to be at risk for dementia, now it's major neurocognitive disorder. Due to, it's all about the due to. What is it due to? Well, you've been learning it's due to things like inactivity and overindulgence and stress and, no, it must be a disease. It's Alzheimer's disease. That was a joke, so. In any case, about 2 to 5% of cases of dementia are from this Alzheimer's disease. The rest are attributed to it, but you're all here learning this weekend about how to avoid becoming another statistic and basically not becoming a demented older adult. So, I am 23 now. I finished undergrad. No, I'm 42. I'm like getting really old, but I still look kind of young some days. And so, I started out my academic life doing translational research, which I'll define momentarily. Translational research is interdisciplinary biomedicine that has at least 3 key parts: work at the bench, the bedside, and the community. And so like many a young lad, I started out at the bench, and I naively thought that I would do animal studies, shown here in the circle. And actually it was just like that. I would wear a white coat and hold little furry animals. And my goal, though, was to eliminate dementia. You gotta remember, I grew up in the Reagan era. I said error, that was a Freudian slip. I grew up in the Reagan era where the best defense was a good offense, right? Nuclear missile race, we're gonna beat them by building a wall. Nobody would think that these days. So, back then, I was really hoping to figure out how to beat dementia by beating it into submission. We were gonna build a better mousetrap, right? That's what we were gonna do. This is going to be the longest setup ever, so here's the joke. Okay, here's the setup, I mean. Okay, so I was an undergraduate, graduate student. I spent the greater part of my 20s in a windowless, dim room. And why would I do that? Well, I was for you guys. It was like trying to save humanity. So I was doing Morris water maze testing. I see a couple blank stares of recognition of like, yes, I've wasted a lot of my time doing that as well. So it takes literally a month of training a mouse or a rat pretty much every day, including weekends, how to navigate a 6-foot diameter tank of water to swim. So I become friends with the rat, and then I place them gingerly in the water. This is a 6-foot tank of water. This is actually 3 6-foot tanks of water. We only have one in the room. And I place them in the tank of water, and then they swim, and they learn to escape on a submerged platform. Why would I've been saying all this fun stuff? Now you realize I'm torturing small animals. But it's okay. Remember sewer rats? Rats like to swim. Rats are actually very good swimmers. In my entire Ph.D., I only had to rescue one rat ever, and he lived. So rats like to swim, and they can actually learn quite well, like how to navigate this. And this is just a demonstration of you can give rats lesions in the brain so they can't figure out where to go. Like you can lesion the hippocampus, which is this memory center. It's critical to memory. It degrades in Alzheimer's. And this is a model of learning in animals. But I didn't want to do lesions. So instead, I studied really old rats. I was like, well, if I'm going to study animals, I want them to have at least lived the good life for as long as possible. Rats live for about 2.5 years. So we would order them at about 2.25 years of age. So they've been hanging out in the cage for about 2.25 years, and then I would train them up on the Morris water maze, and lo and behold, about half of the older, like when I tested young rats would learn to, this is a tracing of the rats navigating the maze at the top gray circle. And so young rats, they learn quickly where the escape platform is, so they swim to the platform, they sit on it, and then the hand of God like reaches down and plucks them out of the water. So then we play a cruel trick. After they've learned it, we do what's called a probe trial. We take away the platform, and we watch how much they try to frantically find that where it used to be. And so, right, you've got the pouty lip. Eventually, this has a great conclusion. I told you, it's the biggest buildup ever. So I do human studies now. The tank is much bigger, but it's actually been done. You laugh, but they've done human Morris water maze. They got funded. I didn't get funded. They got funded. Anyways, so the young rats learn where the escape platform is. We pull a trick. We take the platform away, and we watch. We trace. We actually have, I admit it, I would put whiteout on their head. It's non-toxic, by the way. I put whiteout on their head, and we have a camera tracking the top of their head, and so you can trace like where they're searching in the water, and you can see that, I can tell you that the young really search frantically. And it turns out that about half of old rats maintain that kind of, like we're looking where the platform used to be. About half of older rats, 2.5-year-old rats, do a good job. Like they can still find where the platform used to be, and basically they're somewhat on par with the younger rats. I mean, they have a little bit of degradation, but not much. Then there's the impaired aged rats. So the other half of older rats really lose it. So they really have a flat learning curve. Some of you in the audience are old enough, you've been told you have a flat learning curve now. So it's like it gets older, it gets harder to learn stuff the older you get, but you can still learn stuff. So my research question was, is there any way that I can rescue, not just all the rats, but can I rescue the memory of the aged impaired rats? And if I can, like what is it biologically? Like how would this work? What could I possibly do that would ever help their memory? These are 2.5-year-old rats who like can't remember things. So lo and behold, good timing, as luck would have it, there was a lot of research going on for this molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Any of you fans of brain-derived? I'm a fan of BDNF. Any BDNF fan? BDNF fan in the back. Woohoo! Right. So BDNF is like the water for the grass. It's like this molecule that's released both postsynaptically and presynaptically between two neurons that are communicating. And in development, BDNF promotes survival of the cells, so it prevents them from dying. So cells that are firing in development release BDNF, which sends signals to keep the cell alive instead of dying, and the cells that fire together wire together, and that's how we develop. And it turns out that in later life, BDNF plays a critical role in a different process, and that process is learning and remembering something new. So there's a lot of data I'm not going to show, but basically there's some evidence that BDNF levels decline with aging, and so what would a young mad scientist think to do? Well, I want to replace the BDNF. in the old rats. And so because I'm ambitious, I don't want to do something natural. I want to do something, an abomination. I'm going to infuse BDNF. I did micro pump infusions of BDNF for 4 weeks, not only anywhere into the brain. I put it into the entorhinal cortex, which is like really challenging. These are really tiny brains. So like we stereotaxically found exactly where the entorhinal cortex, which is this memory area that connects directly to the hippocampus, and we showed, convinced the editors at Nature Medicine that we actually did this, which we did. We infused BDNF into entorhinal cortex, which then went to the hippocampus, this memory center, and lo and behold, the punchline was that the old animals learned. Right, I know, all those years of work, thank God. Whew, shoo, wow. They unlocked the door once the results came back positive. No, I'm just kidding. I was not locked inside the room between 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., but the rest of the time I was. No, so the old rats learned, thank you very much, see appropriate. And the data showed it, so the probe trials of the BDNF-infused animals started to look much more like the younger animals, basically. So what's my conclusion about this? Oh, yes, isn't that funny? Isn't it? Ha, 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 it's funny, huh? We all need brain surgery. So I should have shown, Helen knows the punchline, but I should have told you that my thesis advisor actually got funded to implant, right now it's nerve growth factor secreting fibroblasts into Alzheimer's patients. So he did get funded to do brain surgery with trophic factor, but I thought it was even more germane that recently there was a, wow, there really was. So there's a $15 million grant to propose that, okay, well, somebody's hippocampus stops, and entorhinal cortex too. The entorhinal cortex and hippocampus stops working, say after they've been at war, for example. So say their hippocampus has been blown to bits. Like, let's spend $15 million to figure out how to implant a new one. So you would think that, ha ha ha, yeah, everybody needs surgery, and who would ever be crazy enough to think that's the solution? Well, there you go. So right after we build the wall, we're all gonna get implantable hippocampi. At least the ones on this side of the wall. So sorry. So, okay. I did grow up in Berkeley, so I'm sorry. So brain surgery, there's got to be a better way. Like as I was so I went to grad school in San Diego. As I was driving up the coast past the nuclear power plant that was closed, I was thinking, there's got to be a better way. It was really, the sun was beating down on me. I was like, is nuclear energy really the best source of power? There's got to be a better way. So anyways, we're installing solar next weekend in my house. But no, wait, we're talking about brain surgery and the brain. So we're not talking about energy better ways. We're talking about what's there a better way to get the BDNF going in your brain other than doing brain surgery or being forever young, neither of which are an option for me. So it turns out that there is a better way. So lo and behold, just a couple miles away at the Salk Institute in San Diego, there was a researcher, Dr. Gage, and all his postdocs, who shall remain nameless, did a lot of work and showed that, in fact, if you enrich the environment of these poor lab animals, so like the standard cage is on the left and the enriched cage is on the right, that's in black and white and that's in color. If you enrich the environment, you make the neurons very happy. The neurons become very complex, very enriched. There's a lot of more synapses and connections and complexity to them. So the bottom pictures of those are brain cells with Golgi put into them. It's a classic stain to show how complex a nerve cell is. So just there was the initial observation that environmental enrichment, so what these rats are doing makes a huge difference for what their brain cells look like. Hint, hint, like therefore that's why Dr. Levetsky invited me. Because I've helped understand or show or know that what we do actually makes a difference in the end organ in our brain. So that's what's happening there. And even more recently, circa 2015 or about 3 months ago, there was a publication that showed that environmental enrichment is actually triggering BDNF increase. So that same mechanism that some people were saying, well, it's going to take surgery, it's going to take, I'm sorry, but we have to operate. No, in fact, we don't. We need to keep moving. We need to basically realize what the human body was designed to do, which is to move, right? So I have other colleagues who have had campaigns like On the Move, all sorts of things about activity. And why those movements? Well, it turns out that not only physical movement, but environmental enrichment works, and it works on a number of different mechanistic levels. I've kind of delved into my personal trauma, my life history of graduate school years. Hey, you try living on $1,600 a month in Southern California. It's tough. So, but I did have student housing. Sweet. So, okay. So, environmental enrichment works through higher BDNF levels, lowering inflammation systemically and in the brain. In transgenic models of Alzheimer's, the plaques and the tangles, remember, we're going to stamp out Alzheimer's through an offensive attack. We're going to force our way, and we're going to destroy the Alzheimer's. In the transgenics, there's fewer plaques and tangles by enriching the environment, by putting up nice window coverings and having accent pieces. It's like, doesn't sound very offensive. Sounds actually kind of cool. So, and there's more birth of new neurons with environmental enrichment, things like physical activity and socialization. So, the rich environment for the mouses, it increases physical activity, their total movement increases, it increases the complexity of their social interaction, so there's more of a hierarchy of like who gets to play on the swing. I don't know if any of you guys have toddlers, but like not having the swing available when you need it is tough for a kid. So, environmental enrichment really triggers all these fantastic changes in the brain, and we now understand what those are. So, how do we eliminate dementia? It's not about having a better offense. It's about being the mouse you want to see. This is my mouse in a yoga pose. That's the best Google has. If you Google mouse and yoga pose, this is what you get. So, here we are, UCLA. We all need to improve the way we live to add life to the years. I wish I'd thought of adding life to the years, but I have to give credit to Rowan Kahn and other successful aging researchers from years ago who figured out that basically we can use our whole lifespan to optimize brain health, starting from that aforementioned toddler era where our father grabs the other toddler and throws them to the side and lets us use the swing. No, I would never do that. Caught on tape, TMZ. Okay, but we can start in youth and throughout life. It's all really small print, a little too small print for everybody, but you have the thumb drives, I hope, which has maybe. So basically it's saying there are these different lifestyle approaches that some of them are integrative and alternative and some of them are complementary, and we can do that from birth through midlife, actually before birth, like avoiding prenatal smoke and all this. So before birth, through development into older age, to basically wipe out Alzheimer's without firing a single shot. So it's great. So the goal, Rowan Kahn's model, to get to the yellow triangle, the gold in the middle, the successful aging triangle, to reach old age and be free of disease and disability and good cognitive and physical functional health and engage with life, involved in society. So like if you come to a weekend conference and learn all about it, you're aging successfully. Fantastic. My wife said I shouldn't come here this weekend. I should just stay home. I said, but honey, I'm aging successfully. It's like, it's good for us, yes. Okay, so what is lifestyle medicine? So it's, a bit campy, but it's kind of the concept that like a doctor can have a role in this too. So in clinic, I'm seeing patients with depression, dementia, psychosis. I'm a psychiatrist, they're all older. But I try to use my encounters with them to emphasize improvements in things like diet, fitness, mental and social activity, sleep, relaxation techniques. Luckily, Dr. Leversky's office is directly across from mine, about 3 steps away. So if I fail, I send them to her. And she graciously accepts. So now I'm still a researcher, but I'm a translational researcher in the last step, the T3, the translation to practice. So we're taking patients who are in clinic and we're delivering the recommended care to the right patient, and we're studying this on a practice-based level through things like observational studies, surveys, and if we're lucky enough, actual clinical trials. But day to day, I mean, that's kind of the big picture of the academic, goal, but day to day, I'm practicing elements of lifestyle medicine, which is, emphasizing at least those 6 pillars, if not more pillars, which I'll get to in a minute. And this is a bit of it's a very academic slide. It's by a Dr. Chorpita, who's at UCLA Psychology, who's like a master of this motivational model of therapeutic episodes between clients and providers are opportunities for a shared developmental process. So this is kind of like every time I come and give this lecture, I learn a little bit more about healthy lifestyle and medicine, and every time you guys listen to this kind of thing and we have a discourse, you guys learn something as well. And so in this graph right here, in this case, you guys, the audience, would be the darker arrows heading way up, getting a lot of benefit out of what I'm saying, and I'm like the gray arrow. I'm a little bit better off. So, but over time, with the repeated therapeutic episodes, we're all learning, we're sharing, we're teaching each other. Like, you're telling me what your needs are and how you go about getting it better, and I'm sharing with you not only academic knowledge base, but practical experience from other clients, and we can track this over time, and we can have kind of a projected success, like we can know where we think you should be able to get in 6 months, and then when you get 6 months later, we can actually look and see where you are and course correct over time. So this is a very iterative process that both the client and the provider develop and provide expertise, and the body of knowledge grows over time. So before you fall asleep, I'm going to move on. So in my clinic, I've got like these 25 pillars of lifestyle medicine going around in my head, and I asked Helen if I could go over all 25, but she said no. She's going to cover 23 of them, and I'm just going to, or 22 of them. You're going to cover 22?
Just say all of them.
22. I'm just going to say all of them for the recording. I didn't know it was going to be recorded. I object. No. So I'm going to focus down on the simple ones. I'm sorry. For the sake of time, I'm just going to focus on cognitive training, diet, and because it's my favorite, physical exercise, physical activity. And then I'm going to allude to things like sleep, stress reduction, use of humor as a mature defense mechanism. Oh wait, that's not on there. And socialization. Okay. So, and what's the goal? The goal is compression of morbidity. So I didn't think this was a cool idea until I heard, oh my God, I'm just forgetting her name. Who was the politically active in the 70s? She sat on the tank in Vietnam. What's her name? Jane Fonda, yes. Go Jane Fonda. So Jane Fonda was like citing this stuff when she won the UCLA Longevity Center Icon Award. She was like, we need to compress morbidity. I just had this great newsflash of an idea. We need to do this. So yes, Jane, fantastic. So she came up with this idea, compression of morbidity, an ideal goal. And so the idea is, instead of spending, like, health decline today is marked by this, you hit 65, you retire to the couch and the rocker, and then you have this protracted, like, 25, 30-year decay when your adult children are like freaking out because you don't do anything anymore and you're really depressively like non-functional, and that's awful, and you're like this brown leaf for like 30 years. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep people vital and young and green, like stay green, go green, stay green. And so ideally you're going to end up being the vital. It's going to be like a box plot, right? You're just going to be going, doo, 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 and then one day you're going to be looking left when you should have looked right, and pow, you're dead. But don't worry, it'll be quick. So, we're all going to die. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Leversky. So what do we do? How do we achieve this ideal? Better life curve shapes, add more years to life and life to years. There's that saying again. So how do we achieve this? So you've heard a lot this morning how our society pushes us in the other direction to like take away life from the years. But it turns out that, and this is, I'm kind of launching into the preaching to the choir part of the talk, what's good for your heart is also good for your brain. And so they're way ahead of us in the cardiology conferences and the cardiovascular health world and recognizing and understanding that like what's happening in the environment is impacting the end organ of interest. And so when people come into my clinic all the time, I'm using the analogy, it's like, well, we've all had it beaten us to death that we understand the concept of heart failure. You got to avoid a heart attack. And so you got to watch what you eat, control your cholesterol and your blood pressure and all that. And so Americans don't use the term brain failure, but it's basically the same. I would argue it's the same thing. Essentially, just like there's heart failure, you put yourself at risk for having brain failure if you're not aware and engaged with these multiple mechanisms, these multiple ways to decrease not only heart attack risk, things like diet, lifestyle, lipoproteins, cholesterol, inflammation, exercise, BMI, blood pressure, blood sugar. All those factors also can decrease stroke risk. And so I did one of several secondary analyses as I wait for funding to do any original research. I did several secondary analyses based on other people's funding. And I found that stroke risk actually relates to cognitive function in older adults. So these are non-demented adults, and our group tested all these older adults on a very exhaustive neuropsychological battery, so like 3 to 5 hours of testing, and we looked at things like executive function, language, memory, visual spatial function, attention. And then we also measured their stroke risk using a proxy measure called the Framingham Stroke Risk Profile, which includes things like age, gender, which are not modifiable, but then modifiable things like blood pressure, smoking status, diabetes, heart disease, heart changes with the rhythm or the size. And we found that basically as people's stroke risks increased, as a group, the people at higher risk for stroke across the board, these individuals had lower cognitive functions across all domains. So it's a cross-sectional study, it's not definitive, it's an association, but the implication is you want to be in the green. Like you want to control your blood pressure and not smoke and control your blood sugar and basically like take your antihypertensives if you have high blood pressure. And this will protect your brain over time to be able to still function cognitively and avoid the dreaded brain failure. So I think brain failure is a lot more common than Alzheimer's. Actual genetic Alzheimer's is less than 2% of cases, and if you're in one of those families, you know that you're in that family because you're in a clinical trial called the Diane study. Anybody here in the Diane study? Didn't think so. So like none of you should be getting Alzheimer's, but a lot of you could end up with brain failure, which is why I saw that there was a rush on the vegetarian entrees, for lunch. But I got here too late for one of them. I am a vegetarian, but I was too late for getting a lunch. Helen. Yes. So in any case, moving on. So we do these plaque and tangle scans at UCLA, or we used to till the FDA shut us down. So we do these plaque and tangle scans, and it's also shown that cognition relates to the degree of plaque and tangles which are found in Alzheimer's. I just told you how I don't think anybody's going to get Alzheimer's, but we look at Alzheimer's for plaques and tangles in the brain, and it turns out that things like your BMI is a proxy measure for physical activity, dietary habits, and health. Things like BMI relate to plaque and tangle load, as does physical activity levels in people with mild cognitive impairment. That's like a pre-Alzheimer's risk state. So people with mild cognitive impairment are at about a 10 to 15% per year risk of developing Alzheimer's, as opposed to the general population age 65 and over, which the risk is about 1% per year. So it's thought there's this 3 to 5 year transition phase between normal aging, going through mild cognitive impairment, to full-blown Alzheimer's disease dementia. Whew, that was a lot. So it turns out that you have like 5 years. If you get mild cognitive impairment, you got about 5 years. It's a ticking kind of phenomenon. You may or may not convert to Alzheimer's, and what can you do? Well, if you increase your physical activity levels and you adhere to Mediterranean type diets, for example, you can decrease your risk of Alzheimer's. You start combining these effects, and they're hopefully synergistic. I say hopefully because I did a secondary analysis. We don't know if it's synergistic, but researchers over in New York City did a large epidemiologic sort of like prospective study and showed that basically when you combine the most physically active people and the people with the greatest adherence to the to the Mediterranean diet, the combination was synergistically effective at decreasing the conversion rates. So basically, 1 lifestyle effect was good, 2 was worth more than 2. 2 was like worth 3.5 or 4. And so remember that earlier slide, there's like a bunch of different approaches you can take. And so if you start using a bunch of different approaches, you're going to really decrease your risk for getting Alzheimer's. So here's just another study I did, which was looking at sitting being the new smoking. Any of you guys heard of that? Sitting as the new smoking? As you all sit there and say, oh yeah, I'm aware. There's like my 2 peeps in the back are standing. They're like, yep, I knew it. I'm standing. So it was just a really preliminary study. Don't worry about this. It's just basically like your hippocampus shrinks as you sit. And the more you sit, the more it shrinks. So if you need to get up and stretch your legs, don't let me stop you. But what I would also recommend is like of mice and humans. Do you like the gender equality there? So anyways, of mice and humans, aerobic exercise has been shown to correlate to hippocampal volumes. So the hippocampus being the memory center that degenerates in Alzheimer's and also atrophies at about 1% per year in older adults. So 1 year of regular exercise increased the size of the hippocampus by increasing BDNF and resulting in improved spatial memory. Now this was in humans, and that's an MRI of the human brain. They didn't actually do the human water maze test. They should have. I lobbied for the human water maze test, but it was winter and it was in Illinois, so they didn't want to do the Lake Michigan test in December. So instead, they did just a regular neuropsych test, boring, but it did show in that other graph that basically if you were among the regular exercisers, you improved over the course of a year in your cognitive function, whereas if you were in the control, it's really cruel. Like the control group, they have them do stretching and toning as if like, oh yeah, we're helping you, stretch, stretch, and then they're like, psych, this doesn't do anything. Like you need to actually walk. So the control group was a like psych out stretching and toning group, which does not help. Like it helps for other things like balance, strength. So yeah, it's okay you're in the control group. It's okay. They're in the control group. Wow. Helen's, you think you're off. I think you're off. So her control group is finger tapping, and it's good for them. Okay. So sorry, I only have a couple minutes left. I want to leave time for questions. So mental stimulation is good. Any mentally stimulating activity is good for you, except watching TV. Sorry. Though I love, can we get a Simpsons exception, please? Can that be good for you? How about if you tweet about it while you watch it? What if you tweet while you watch? Does that work? Still doesn't work. So this is dose dependent. Basically, the more days a week you do cognitively enriching things, the lower and lower your dementia risk gets. Woohoo! So that's good. And they've done big trials having to do with training people on memory, processing speed, reasoning. They use very clinically sterile cognitive testing, and then they totally have gamified it. Like there's Posit HQ, Lumosity, healthy brain aging games. You can Google this. Like there's a lot of products that have free trials, like $13 per month for full access. So there's some fair evidence that the things you train on you can improve on. So perfect practice makes perfect kind of thing. But then it's also true that like we're not really sure how much this transfers to real life. So just because you can like click on the right button at the real time doesn't mean you're going to remember what you went to the store to buy without a list. Right? We're not so sure that it translates, but we're sure that your credit card's going to get billed again. So just, yeah, we are sure. Okay. So what's another way to go about it? Learn memory tricks. Memory mnemonics. Memory training. So like, for example, if I say, hey, I want everybody to learn the name Frank. So we can say, okay, it starts with F, the next letter is R, the next letter is A, it's NK. We're now as good as a 4-year-old. We've learned how to spell. So remember the name Frank, okay? So that could be like really dull and hard to do. So we want to use associations. And so at the Longevity Center, UCLA, we have these memory classes where we teach people like a good way to learn something new is to make associations. So for some people, you're already doing this. Like the name Frank, you think of old blue eyes, like Frank Sinatra. Other people, you have a German au pair, so you think of Frankfurt, Germany. Not that I have a German au pair. I would never German au pair. Or you might think of Frankfurter, like a hot dog, or somebody who's frank is honest and truthful. To be frank, I actually do have a German au pair, And I do like listening to Sinatra. So, okay, so now you'll never forget that I used the name Frank to ask you to remember that, because hopefully you've picked up on the idea, which is you've made your own associations like Uncle Frank or something like that, somebody you knew named Frank. Frankly, my dear, that kind of thing. So, and it turns out that forming associations, why does this work? It's kind of like exercise and enrichment works because it increases BDNF. Well, how does forming associations work? Well, I don't have data to show that it increases BDNF, which it probably does. We're still processing that with the CTSI. We're still trying to get them to run the BDNF assay. Have they run it? I don't think they have yet. We're still waiting for them to run the assay. But in any case, so we're trying to prove that. But in the meantime, it has been shown that associations activate networks of cells. So it's not just the hippocampus, it's the hippocampus with the frontal cortex, with the parietal cortex. And so when you do all this visual imagery or geographic, associations or smells of foods and names of people, you're activating all these networks of the brain. And so the more limbic you make it, the more emotional you make something, the more chance you're actually going to encode it and remember it. So you can actually really improve. This is that whole memory palace idea of these strange people who compete in like memorizing decks of cards. They're making associations with locations, and that's just another example of this. It's a different technique than but it's basically they're using their networks of cells to form new memories. So there you go. So again, so what we do matters, what we do makes a difference. At UCLA, we are doing not only studies, but we're doing this in the clinic. And so we've got this, for example, memory care program that meets half a day a week, twice a week for people with early dementia and their caregivers. And now we're doing stuff like we're intervening. We're doing physical activity with them, stress reduction techniques, going over coaching for healthy diet, improving memory through learning association techniques. And Dr. Small, my boss, is launching a Alzheimer's prevention project through our UCLA health system to have like a 12-week course of health coaching paired with physical activity, and to try to show through the numbers that we're actually improving people's cognitive function. So it's an exciting time. I've gotten out of the dark room with the tank of water and into the light, trying to help patients day by day and doing translational research with them. Really, my end game is to motivate lifestyle change through educating people, helping them set goals, and then giving feedback all along the way. So with that, that's my prepared materials. I'd like to stop, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for the next few minutes. Thanks.